Sorry, guys, I've been really busy and this stuff has been overwhelming me actually because I've been getting like a lot of information and I'm stewing on it. I'm stewing on it. But I had just done a post on the Insta, I'm like on the Insta, about the Trump shooter guy because I was talking about I was talking about a lot of things actually on that one. And I didn't need to know his IQ or anything else. I could read it by the train of thought. So the train of thought. So I was like, maybe I should kind of explain that in some way. So baseline is my own IQ, whatever that is, you guys. It's a mystery. No, so I'll look at it as a baseline. Like this is where my IQ is at, right? This is the way that I can, how I go on in life, right? Like my education level, how I kind of process information. And you can kind of judge people by the basis of how they kind of come to conclusions about things. I don't judge people by their bad spelling. Actually, there's a whole side topic on that where the language is changing. And that doesn't mean that has nothing to do with IQ or education or anything like that necessarily. It's just that the old white man's what they considered like, classy style of talking. If you go back into history, it has changed like dramatically. And if you go back to the Bible times with the thee, those, and thous, okay, nobody talks like that today unless you're a cult member. But the language changes. So sometimes, some people could have different disabilities. And so I can kind of read into that because I have certain ones too. So it has nothing to do with that. But the train of thought, like how they calculated the action, right? Like anybody can do that action. Like the dumbest fool can do that action. It's just, I think that most people wouldn't choose to do that action. It was just sort of a way how I came about this conclusion, the best way I can explain it, that the IQ level may have been higher than even my own because it was kind of like I'm looking at it and I'm like, yeah, it's interesting because I came to the conclusion that you're going to see a progression, a possible progression of, actions that these guys will do. Um, that differentiates the time of Ted Bundy because Ted Bundy's story came up, so I'm going to just kind of go through it in a second. That he pre-planned it, calculated it in such a way. It was just the manner how they did it, without any other information on the guy. Like he could be, going to Harvard and stuff. But then I have a side topic on the Harvard stuff and that whole thing, and how education is based on white man's conclusion, and we all have to learn from it versus it coming from anybody else. Okay, so I disagree with a lot of those things, and I don't believe that even half those people are really that brilliant over there. There's a whole other thing with that. And they should question, like, well, some guy that's a straight up sociopath is sitting there being okay to go into Harvard. Why all those guys are a bunch of problems, right, in society. But again, that's a whole other topic. These are big topics. So that's why I'm saying I get a little overwhelmed because it's a lot of information and I'm staying on about a million different subjects. But anyways, we're talking about personality disorders and how all these people have personality disorders. And basically when we grew up normalizing a million personality disorders and nobody was educated enough to pull it out. And I was just talking about this like last night, and yeah, I've been talking about it, but this lady here, who's actually Ted Bundy's cousin, actually seen the personality disorder. But it's funny because she's like, then I started questioning my reality and who to trust and blah, blah, blah. Now, I think a lot of us who've been victims to a Ted Bundy a million times over, these type of men, had that feeling. And I was saying that it more has to do with the ignorance of us, and why we feel that way because we're not educated to pull that out. So as we're growing up, we're like literally in a pool of mental health issues. And so this is what we've considered normality, normal. And I think a lot of us at some point, realize they're all this way. Like a lot of people are this way. And they feed it to us like this is normal human behavior. And I highly disagree with that. And when you run down all these different personality disorders, you'll just see like just a tank of stuff. Like I'm not the expert on all the different disorders. It's like I kind of highly focus on these particular individuals. And but they tend to be layered and layered. Like there isn't just like, oh, this one guy only has this. It's like it's layered. So then I'm pulling things out and I'm like, that's interesting. And then all once in a while I'll learn about a different side PD that's actually going with it and stuff. And then when I learn about it, which I did the other day on this other one, I go, oh, that one's so common. I commonly pick it out. I just put it in with this thing because they tend to have it. But the reason why, because it said common, and I go, okay, yeah. So when we were growing up, that PD right there actually shows up by the age of 8. And I go, yeah, and it's so obvious. It isn't one where you go, wow, I had no idea. You would say you had no idea if you're told that that is a normal boy. And that's exactly what happened. And so the family dynamics were highly abusive. Now, the cousin didn't talk about the upbringing portion in the home life where, it could be a number of things, like the parents just being overly strict. It could be that, mom cuddled him to death and never, whatever. And he had problems with his mother because he's killing women. So there tends to be, like, when I'm going through these cases, there tends to be, like, a strange dynamic with them and their mom in those cases. But sometimes, like, a mom may not even be present, and it's a dad being abusive to the mom, and they're picking up from the dad's side. It could be like that. And then nobody gets it corrected, right? Because back at the time that Ted Bundy was a kid, nobody was going, oh, all these white men are a bunch of sociopaths, or they have other things going on. And so it just became, they're normal and you need to put up with it. That's what happened. So this woman is on that side of, she's abused. She is abused because she's kept ignorant and she's also kept to deal with it. And then we're the victims of it. And then it turns into this other thing. So I kind of just want to point out something that she said she picked up, and I didn't even know Ted Bundy did this. It's really weird. And so we'll listen to it for a second.
Street down below behind the store, the main, what they called the Ave. And all these people were pointing and rushing down towards my left, which was towards the corner. And I was wondering what was going on there. And I just kind of got a bad feeling that something wasn't good. And I went out the store and started asking questions, and I just followed the crowd down to the corner and waited at a stop sign to see what was going on. And I could see across the street these people milling all around someone. And then the crowd parted for a second. I saw my cousin in the center of it. And he was standing there with his hands outstretched like he was some kind of a messiah, and speaking loudly while he was slowly turning, saying, "I'm Ted Bundy," over and over again. And that's when it just hit me that no one would do that if they were innocent. And the way he was acting was not like someone who had any regrets or concerns about his behavior. And that is the moment that I knew. That was the chilling moment that I went from hoping beyond hope that this was.
Okay, so I just want to say there, she picked up his narcissism. Now, I believe that they classify him as a psychopath, but that's the narcissist behavior, the narcissist behavior and the God complex. I've talked about that, where they all think there's some type of guru or a Jesus or anything, and that's literally where the historical thing goes back into, is a guy with a personality disorder. That's exactly where all those things came from, and everybody wants to believe some white guy as some Jesus Christ that came to the planet and did these things. And they if you put your trust in that, you're going to put your trust in a Ted Bundy. But that's exactly the behavior. And that behavior isn't something that comes out later. That behavior is from childhood. So his actions have always would have always been that way. But I can tell you, I never even heard of that as a kid. Like, they didn't say, oh, this guy's a narcissist. Like, we didn't even know these terms. Like, it wasn't even something, oh, should we pick this out? You could ask me and I would go, oh, that guy's an asshole. That guy's a bully. That guy's a predator. Like, I could say those things, but you wouldn't be able to identify, oh, that guy has a total personality disorder as a kid. You wouldn't. And they're really funny about diagnosing kids. And in some cases, I could see why, because it was interesting because I was reading another comment from somebody and they're like, well, all these traits were from all the kids growing up. And I'm like, yeah, that's my point. They were all a hot mess. Like, it doesn't click. It's almost like, oh, because the entire class is a personality disorder, therefore that probably couldn't be the case. It's like, no, that's the case. It was just like that argument from Sync. It's like, oh, all the fathers got their sons raped, so it could not therefore be rape because everyone did it. This is why I'm talking about IQ. I'm like, holy crap, how'd you come to that conclusion? But no, it means that there's that much of a problem. And you noticed it, but they're noticing it now because they're breaking down the disorder. So to them, they're like, isn't that everyone? So what does that mean? I don't know. It's like that. I'm reading the comments. I'm reading people as they're learning more about these disorders. And I'm like, yeah, that's what we're saying. That's what I've been saying. I go, they're all a bunch of rapists. I go, that's the thing. The men knew, but the women were taught to, number one, deal with it, allow it, and then be abused. But the women also got abused, right? So they're ignoring the disorders. Then the women have kids, right? Then they raise their sons the way that these sociopath men want them to be raised. And, or because they got abused, then they abuse their sons, and their daughters, right? So it's this chronic cycle. And I keep going. It's so hard to tackle because you get these people that are like, I'm fine and I'm going to be a piece of shit no matter what. And I'm going to call everybody a liar. The liar thing came from a personality disordered guy. That liar tag is from society that is a clusterfuck of mental illness. And so then women come out and they go, oh, I thought they, would think I was lying. This thing. I go, but they're only saying that because they're hearing the rapist socio say that as their defense. And I'm like, I'm tired of hearing it. And I think it's vital that we all are educated on, a general portion of these personality disorders. So, like, you can go, oh, it's them, not me. It's them, not me. Like, legitimately, it's them, not me. And they don't actually believe that you're lying. Do you think Ted Bundy believed that they were lying? He did the crime. He knows exactly what he did. And so he's getting off on the attention. He's a narcissist through and through. He's standing out on a street corner acting like a god. He loves the attention. It's feeding him, right? And you're looking at it. And I go, yeah, I don't know any narcissist that's separated from being a socio. You know what I mean? That's not. Show me one. I keep saying, I go, show me one. I don't know a damn single one. Are they all serial killers? No. Do they have a capability of committing a homicide? Hell yeah. And they might later. That's the thing with these guys, that it's like, oh my God. They may not all turn out to be a serial killer, but later when you see these other cases where, like, at the tail end of their life, they go and commit a homicide, right? Or they kill out their family. They do some freaking weird thing. Like, it could be when they're 50, 60, 70 years old. But they've been on this train that was like, it's gonna crash eventually. It could have, early on, it can later. And they're not all stupid and dropouts. And it was so annoying reading Kamala with their bullshit. I go, she is an uneducated woman. And again, when we're looking at IQs, I go, yeah, coming out to the conclusion of, oh, I was looking at the homicides and then the victims of homicide. And I concluded that being a dropout, they were all dropouts, most of them. So I'm concluding that being a dropout is going to lead to homicide. And then they started targeting poor women. I mean, can you believe this? That was the conclusion and how she comes to things. Just like that fake human trafficking crusade that these idiots did that harmed everybody. And it didn't stop anything. It had people die, innocent people die, and them targeting all the innocent people. That's how you know an IQ. That's how you know an IQ. Because even if I thought that, let's just say I'm an uneducated person and I'm looking at that, I'm like, oh, maybe the correlation is because of dropouts. Well, I wouldn't go make a law to go start doing that based on that little portion right there. I would definitely look into it and I would want to correct it. But the thing is, I wouldn't go out trying to arrest everybody for this, that thing. I would look deeper into it. And then that's why I always put, or at least I tried to, how I came to my conclusion, because if I err, then somebody's going to correct it. And I have erred on opinions, and it's just based on ignorance because I don't know something, right? Know something to come to my stance, or opinion on a topic. Because, and I try to make sure of that because somebody will come in and go, oh, well, if you believe that, you're going to harm us, right? And it's like, oh, I wasn't even thinking of that. And it's not a purposeful act. It's just, you don't go out making laws and doing these things where it harms like a shitload of people without getting as much information that you can on that topic. But anyways, I just wanted to bring that up because she eventually saw it, but she's actually not really saying like, oh my God, I just seen him and he's a total narcissist. I don't even know if she could verbalize that. Like, I don't know. She's just saying, I seen him act this way, and it's not an action that an innocent person would do. Well, wait, what we're talking about, there's people that are calling out the narcissist behavior. I go, that's straight up from that. So what you just saw is him being a total narcissist. And so that's a personality disorder, and that is unfixable. And so then therefore he has it in his mind that he enjoys the attention from that whole thing. And he's a pathological liar. That's like another thing to it. But he was one of the first one I was trying to get into because he was doing an interview and he was mad trying to feel like, I don't know, it was such a manipulation. Like I had a hard time with the read with him first. This is like eons ago. Like now I'm like clean read everybody. But I was having a difficult time with him because I was like, I don't know if I should believe that he's actually trying to feel empathy here or he's just pulling some bullshit over. The whole time he's pulling bullshit over. But also at the same time, when he's explaining things, like he tried to pull out pornography, he did some bullshit in here. It's hard to say the place that that's coming from, if it's just a purposeful manipulation, or it's the fact that he is that uneducated, that he doesn't know why he's such a F up. And it may be a combination of both. I don't, we can go into a thing about that. But no, it would be unlikely that these men could really define their problems at the time because they're not defining it now. Like they may know that there's something wrong with them, but they don't know why or what it was, and it wasn't, pulled out early on when it should have been. So it just got overlooked. That's my point. So I think she says one more thing on here, but
I lost my faith in being able to judge character. I completely trusted him and thought I knew who he was. Was he ever that person? Maybe when he was
no,
younger, he was a
no,
nice kid, but
no.
somewhere something happened to him, and we didn't really detect any of this. You realize I'm having dinner with him, and 2 nights later he murders another young sorority girl just a few blocks from where we lived. And you get to the point where you doubt your own ability to trust anybody. I mean, that's why I say trust, but don't be deceived. It changed my life. He worked for the Seattle Crime Commission, wrote pamphlets on crime prevention for women, even wrote a pamphlet on
A bunch of men do
rape
this.
prevention for women. I mean, what was his
Didn't
motive
the
for
cops do
doing all
that?
that?
Yes,
You
they
come
did.
to question yourself. Everything that you thought was black and now is white, up is down. You just don't know what reality you're dealing with. And that's what it did to me. My whole world tilted. I think he was so accomplished at lying that he was really good at lying to himself. I'm hoping that it helps somebody along the way, because we don't choose our families, right? They are who they are. They're good or bad, they're there. There's nothing you can do about it. And sometimes things happen in families that aren't wonderful. And it's important to be able to talk about it or seek help about it.
Oh, definitely. Okay, there was like a lot to touch on that one. But I was saying that, yeah, so it's just her not being educated on those guys. Two, no, he would have always been that way. And so as a child, he was probably just a really big manipulator. But you have to go back in the childhood for us to even sit there and go, oh, the parental dynamic was like this. Because you're pulling at straws. I don't know what the thing was. Because even if they question the parents at many times that we've been going through these cases, they lie. I mean, or they're so oblivious, like the Jeffrey Dahmer dad. Yeah, that one. I was like, yeah, if they're anywhere like that, it's like obvious what happened there. So yeah, so it could be in a scenario where they're just almost like an absent parent while being there, like emotionally absent and ignorant to, I don't know, it could be a number of things, but can't really say right there. So yeah, no, he would have always been like that. That's just a fact. It's not a thing that's developed later. So that we know from, going through all these cases and the going through those PDs and looking at some of the research and the different opinions on those things for years and years and years, and the conduct that happened to me. So,
Sorority.
the pamphlet thing. Okay, yeah. So I keep saying beware of these guys because, okay, so the cops did it too, right? So what were the cops saying? So you have to sit there and break this down. Yeah, well, the way you view the cops has been all kinds of wrong. First of all, it's a white male supremacist entity. That's just a fact. There's no argument about that. It's not anything else. So their viewpoint then was human trafficking women and raping them and not giving them freedom. So then they created these entities, and in the entities, rape was viewed as okay and legal through the system and promoting raping children, human trafficking kids, adopting them and raping them and using them as slaves, mostly if they were American, the Indians, the Native Indians, and or people of color and just women generally. So that is actually the true history of America. It's almost like women are so oblivious to it because it wasn't even taught in school. So it's just like you have to go back on your own and study like what the hell happened here. And so when you see that, a person that's like that has a personality disorder. It is not a thing where that's a normal human being acting out in that way. So when you're looking at all of it, you have to look at it as those are ill people. They know what they're doing. It isn't, they don't know what they're doing. They do. And then they started coming up with all these personality disorders. But the way that they're viewing it at the time is them being the sane one. So the bias comes from a sociopath going, I'm sane and everybody else is psychotic. Yeah, that's what they were doing. Absolutely, that's what they were doing. And so it's not written in stone, you guys. It is based on a bunch of bullshit from a long time ago. Are these people disordered? Yes, but the way that they're defining it and who they were looking at has the bias in it was people of color as a bunch of psychotics. We're looking at the gays as being sexual predator. There was a whole thing with that. And women being lunatics. So this is the bias of the head doctor field. I like the head doctor field. Um, yes, so then they came up with these conclusions like, a sociopath is a dropout that commits a lot of crimes and they keep getting arrested. And it's like that's a type. We could say it like this. That's a type. It's not all of them, and it didn't. And then the way they were talking about it is like peeing the bed. I'm like, every kid pees the bed. Some even way later. Like the way they speak of it gets everybody else bullied when they're not even this type of human right here that they're pulling out when they put them under the serial killer thing. But they also thought that their Christian household was wholesome and healthy. And the truth is that they even know, like they won't even say it because they're such swine and hypocrites, is that they won't tell you, the public, that yes, the religious households were massively abusive and they created these monsters. So you have to tell me, your household, was it overly religious? Was it military like? Was it these things? Because that is the thing that's creating the monsters. And you don't want a military home because you have to be a sociopath to go fucking kill people. You shouldn't be raising your children like that. So those things are definitely on the table. And I believe that people were not viewing the spoiled brat child, that thing, as actually being child abuse. It definitely is. Like, that's a horrible thing for somebody to even come out like that. But it is a form of child abuse. It's a form of child abuse and neglect and enabling. It's a whole other thing. But yeah. And then you get a bunch of narcissists out of that too. So no. Like those things, like they wanted to like target the kid like for it happening at the time when they're kids. But the problem is the kid is only as good as the environment they are in. And so and since we know that, they've always known. The crazy thing is like they know these things, but then they don't do anything about it. They're just like, yeah, whatever. He was abused. We all were abused. And then they brush it off, right? They minimize it. The cops minimize it. And so who was sitting there putting the SOL, right? The cops. The cops are sitting there telling us it's our fault and that we need to sit there and have a girlfriend with us to walk down the street. I mean, this is ridiculous. And then the cops are all rapists, and then they're promoting rape. So then victims would go into the cops, and the cops are telling them that's consensual. You're all a bunch of liars. And when you ask the cops what their personal opinion was of you, your gender, lady, that they said basically that you're all a bunch of liars, and that only 10% of y'all that rape actually even happened. That's what they said. Now, do they actually believe that? No. That's the truth of that thing. So that is a manipulative piece of shit sociopath speaking. And boy, oh boy, is there a lot of them. So what they're also saying in that, which was frightening, is that the sexual conduct that they have done to us is mighty fine in their brain, and they don't consider that a crime. That's what they're doing. So it had nothing to do with they really think you're lying. What is happening there is the narcissist, the PD disordered male is sitting there okaying him being a sociopath, rapist, child molester, human trafficker, abuser. And to him, that's okay. And that was enabled throughout history. So that's what I'm trying to break down. And I'm like, no, victims need to know it. And they want to mute me because guess who owns all the fucking platforms? The same piles of shit. Sorry, but that's just the truth. And it's amazing because I've never done this conduct to anybody, and all of a sudden they can't find a rapist out here, but they know my every move. Isn't that amazing? Wow, there was a guy that recently just got caught, and I was reading a story because, I read all the, the rapist stories. I know them all from here to India. But this guy he was a rapist in a different state. I think it was Massachusetts. I'm not going to pull it up right now. but he was on the run. So he comes out here and he lives out here in the valley. And I go, "Oh yeah, every time." I go, "It's almost like clockwork. If this rapist monster is wanted in another state, they always come and move by me somewhere near me in the vicinity, you guys. It is like literally almost clockwork." And I was looking at it and I go, "Yeah, you live down the way and how scary." And he's kind of familiar. And also, he's using names that are similar to the perpetrator pastor, like he's this wannabe mafia guy. And I'm like, did I run into him? Like, I was looking at him and I was looking at him because I lived over there. So I was like, I don't know. So then the trail dies, right? All of a sudden, they don't know where he's at. So FBI is like, "We're looking for him. We don't, last time he'd be out here in the valley." And sure enough, so after they put that thing out into the public and he'd been on the run for like 30 fucking years, like some bullshit, right? So since the 90s, I think. I don't know. It was like in the 90s, he was like out in this area. Something weird. Something weird. So I spent like all night like going through his stuff. And I'm like, this is weird. That guy's actually familiar. I keep having this happen. I'm like, I don't know why it's happening. I don't know if it's that they could have came into my job. I could have ran into him just being out and about in public, right? I could have went to a store and I seen the guy and he said something. You know what I mean? It could be any of that, those kind of things. And, or he had a job and I went in there and he was a store clerk. I don't fucking know. So anyway, so then he goes on a high speed chase. They go finally arrest him yesterday or the day before, whenever. So they finally find him and he was still out here. I knew it. I go, why would he leave LA? The reason why they come here most of the time is because, number one, California, the state of California doesn't bust anybody for rape most of the time, and mostly not celebrities. But also, if you're wanted from another state, it's even less likely the government here is going to seek you out unless they did something to try to look for you. You know, it would be this thing. But that's not the top of their radar. They don't care about rapists. That's the other problem of the cops. So then, because they're rapists, they don't fire the cops that are rapists. So if you have rapist cops, they're not going to go after other rapists. So, and also because there's so many people here in LA that it's so much easier to hide. And so they pick places like this than going to, they could probably get away with it in a small town too, where people don't even watch TV or some bullshit. But here it makes more sense because you could hide in crowds of millions of people and get away with that and people wouldn't even pay attention to you. And then when they caught him, I was like, oh my God, I wouldn't even recognize that guy for the life of me. Like, he could have raped me like 30 years ago, and I could have been in the same room with that guy, and I wouldn't even recognize him now. Because he looks like a total slob. Like, he's like overweight, way old, and you would just like think, you could think like, that guy's kind of familiar, but I don't know who that is. Yeah, I was just kind of tripping on that. I go, how different he looked from the initial time when they were looking for him. So like a victim of his from 30 years ago could legitimately be in the same room with that guy and wouldn't know that that was him. So I don't know who thinks the cops are on their side. They literally let Ted Bundy go like a million times, right? They did not care about the sex crimes. They keep minimizing all sex crimes. They kept putting, they put it on this spectrum like rape is the worst crime ever when they don't even actually believe that. Because rape is a hate crime. It's an action of power and control, and it's a general hate crime. So the mindset behind it is a hate crime. So when you're looking at some of these other cases with these child predators, it has something to do with the power and control thing. There's a lot to it, and there was a newer case that I was looking at that the media, of course, here's the problem with the media. There's a lot of problems with the media. They'll throw you out a story and you want to hate the guy to death, right? But you don't know anything about his history and how come he did what he did. And the thing that's so important is this background. So we're getting stories now from other family members, which they should have always did, right? They should have always did that. Even back in the 70s, they never did that. They never put a face to those victims. They never talked about the family too much. It was always, oh, we're going to glorify the man that's this way. And all the men want to be that person. And they see themselves in him and they glorify this man. And who are they going to start mimicking? That piece of shit, Ted Bundy. And then nobody cares about the women. Like, you can't even name half the victims of him. You know, maybe more so today because they're starting to pull him out. But no, you couldn't. It's just some face of some chick. They're like, good, he offed him. You know, it's like this thing. And that's how they minimize us as a human. When they were talking about these stories, it was so disgusting. Like, who's going to run around? I'm going to run around with my name, Ted Bundy. You know, or these other guys in these bands, right? That you, oh, we're going to call ourselves one of these serial killers. It's like, oh, that's really cool, dude. But those people have personality disorders, the ones that are doing that. And there's so much to be said about it, you know, and they just, and so the thing was with the rape thing. Okay, so he got involved with the, you know, rape lines and yes, so all these men keep doing it and I call them fake crusaders. So I have a term for it. They're fake and they're crusading. So they're doing it to manipulate themselves into our hemisphere and they are turned on by the topic of rape. So every time I'm talking about this topic, I will attract them a million times over. And the reason is the same reason that Ted Bundy put himself in the middle of that. Like, he gets off on the fear. He's getting off on, like, so if I call in, if he was on a rape crisis hotline, and I call in, I go, oh my God, I got raped and blah, blah, blah. This is like any cop that you tell those stories to. He's getting off on it. He's getting off on, it's like hearing a fantasy story to his fucking ear. And then he's getting more ideas for plots. It is like a chronic pornography to him. It's not the pornography they're talking about. The porn to him is hearing a victim in crisis. And so the turn on is that of that's what he wants to get because it makes him feel powerful, putting someone into terror, you know, and traumatizing him. He loves it. So that's where they're getting off on it. So I try not to go on these, like, when I'm talking about the topic, you don't hear me doing, oh my God, it's all, you know, this thing that the cops want you to do in order to look like a real victim. Okay, yeah. Well, if I start doing that, then the cops get turned on and they get turned on by rape. So then that's why they'll sit there and go, well, we don't think she's telling the truth. They'll do that because they're not getting fed that disgusting fucking porn right there. Yeah, so there's a lot to that. So I try, you know, because I know them pretty well. Sometimes I don't care that I'm feeding into them because they're piles of shit and it has to be said. But at the same time, the entertainment value when you're talking about these topics, there's a couple things they do. They get turned on by you talking about it, but they also get turned on by degrading you while you're talking about it. So some of these people who may have done videos or, you know, whatever, talking about their rapes or sexual assault things or anything like that, you may notice that in the comments, you'll hear them degrading you and that's actually a flag of who that is. And I go, yeah, you'll pick it up. And then, yeah, for some guy to sit there and minimize the conduct on me and somehow justify degrading me for decades, you know, that person right there is a dark hole. That person right there is a Ted Bundy, and they're not hiding. They're not hiding at all. It has to do with perception. So your perception of people is ignorant. So I think people don't want to look at themselves as being ignorant. We're ignorant. I mean, we were ignorant kids, and it was purposefully so. And we were made to be ignorant by the sociopath male. That's just the truth. That is the honest to God truth. That is a historical problem. And you could go back into time, way back yonder, how far back that goes, where nothing you've learned has anything to do with women educating the public. It has to do with men brainwashing little girls. So the education, it goes back into that. Men and education, them trying to control education, getting women to be so idiotic to sit there and demand that everybody be dumb. That's exactly what's going on right now still. I mean, what morons are these? I mean, their IQ level is on the floor. Just because they went to an Ivy League school doesn't mean that their IQ is actually really high. They're really good manipulators, though, I will say that. And they just may have um, better memory skills of learning something in a classroom, but it certainly doesn't make them a smarter person. I will tell you that. The way how they view education, again, has to do with white men and their point of view and how they gauge that. And I highly disagree with how they view that thing right there. So they want to fight people trying to change that whole thing too. So, and it should be changed because there's some people who they want to call stupid because they may have dropped out, they may have really bad scores in their tests, but they're actually really smart human beings that they could literally run the country. And yet they'll never have that chance because of that bullshit over there. But again, that's another thing on the side. But I just wanted to bring that topic up to you guys because, we do talk about how everybody's a Ted Bundy and how men like all want to be a Ted Bundy and they strive to be a Ted Bundy, including the cops.